Hello, and here we are. I've just had a song come into my head, and I can't remember where it's from. Here we are, nowhere left to go. 2, 3, 4, and then it kicks in. I think it's a Stiff Little Finger song. Here we are, nowhere left to go. 2, 3, 4. Anyway, look Stiff Little Fingers up. Band from the 70s, early 80s, punk band from back in the day. That you might not have heard of. Still touring, doing this stuff. Anyway, here we are, Self-Care Shorts. Today we're going to talk about flow. Unlocking the flow state. Because as you remember, if you're tuning in on a regular basis, we're talking about the pillars of success for social workers. And these things aren't just for social workers. Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. All right, so we're talking about things that are going to help us, key ideas that are going to help us be successful. I was going to say in the workplace, because largely that's what I focus on, but also in life, I suppose, because the same tips kind of work. You know what I mean? So unlocking the flow state. How do we focus? Well, one of the things popularized by a psychologist called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm getting better at it, although it's a very complicated name. His friends call him Mike, I believe, which is very useful. Anyway, you can find his book because it's called Flow, and he has this big long name, so you can find that. And flow, F-L-O-W, is a sense of deep engagement. Think of your deep work tasks. If you've come across that term before, deep work tasks are tasks that require us to be absorbed in them fully in order for us to be at our most efficient in terms of getting them done. Get into a state of flow. Get into your deep work tunnels, as I talk about. I'm sure if you scroll back through the many self-care shorts things, you'll see one on deep work or flow if you have a look, if you want a bit more on that. And it's a place where we become absorbed in the work, or in fact, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi first observed this a lot and writes a lot about in the book about it in Athletes and Artists. It's that state you get into when, as the footballer on the pitch or the cricketer, you become oblivious to the fact there's a crowd watching you because you're just in the moment. As the artist or the performer, the singer, you become so absorbed in the song, or you forget there's an audience, or you become engrossed in creating the image as you draw it or you paint it. The time just kind of disappears, and it seems an elusive thing. And there are some things that create this. And some of the things that we need to think of is to get this time to stand still. We tend to get into this flow when the challenge we presented with matches the skills that we have. So we feel that we're within, or maybe just at the top end, nudging our abilities, our skills to fulfill the challenge we've been presented with. So we get into this state when we just have enough in order to do the task without it becoming overwhelming. So, maybe difficult to achieve in early career kind of stuff, but as you get more into it, maybe you can, or you can with shorter tasks, smaller tasks. We get into a state of flow when the goals are clear, when we know what we're about to achieve, when we know what we need to achieve, and it's great. There's a little diagram that I use often, which has overlapping circles, and it's about clarity and determination, I think is one of them. So this idea that if you're clear about what it is that you need to do, and you are focused and determined to get the task done, you're more likely to kind of get into a state of flow because you know exactly what it is you're trying to do. Discipline and focus. Those are the two things. There's a third one. It'll come back to me. So you get into this state by having the discipline to stay within the deep work, but also you know what you're trying to achieve. You know what you're trying to do. And that means you have to be planned and organised. You have to do your planning in such a way that when you get in to do this thing, you know that this is the thing you should be doing to the expense of everything else, because you've planned it in such a way that this is the thing you need to do right now. You know, you put distractions to one side and you get on with it. So you've got clear goals, and you get some sort of immediate feedback on your actions, and that doesn't have to be somebody telling you how great you've done it, but you get some sort of feedback. You kind of tick the box to say you've done the thing. You submit the report, you know, or you tick off something from your list of things that you need to do, or whatever it happens to be. And when you do this, time stands still, distractions kind of vanish. So challenges match your skills. You've got clear goals, and there's some sort of feedback system built into it. I get to the end of the task. For me, my immediate feedback is I get to the end of the task and I change it to grey in my calendar when I've done it. You know, so that gives me some feedback of, well done, you've concluded the task. It's interesting though, this state of flow. I've just read recently a book called Attention Span by Gloria Mark. I like Gloria Mark. Gloria Mark has written quite a bit of stuff around email, around productivity in the workplace, and she talks about flow and says actually for some of us in some professions it's almost an impossible state to achieve, although she doesn't dismiss it lightly, I suppose. And she suggests that rhythm is the new flow. Our job role should have a rhythm to it. There should be a rhythm to it, moving through task to task. A rhythm to the morning. We should do certain things at certain times of day, so that there's a rhythm to it, you know. And I've talked about this in other places. Routine is really important. Having like little kind of rituals is very important. So this routine, rituals, this idea that we give our day flow by giving it rhythm, and I think that's really important. So I think that's kind of flow across the day, I think, and I think that's really important. And maybe, Gloria Mark suggests, maybe that type of flow, that rhythm across the day, maybe is more important than getting into a deep workflow state. That in terms of the job we do when there are distractions. And we'll talk about those distractions in other places, you know, and multitasking and the like not being a really good thing. So how do we go about maybe trying to achieve this as best we can, if, as Gloria Mark says, it's difficult? Well, going back to some of the things I said earlier, define clear goals, define clear achievable goals. There are some things to say about this, I suppose. You know, there's the planning fallacy. We tend to underestimate how long large tasks take, for example. We tend to live in hope that with the 2 hours we've got this afternoon we'll get this thing done, when we probably know we won't be able to. So breaking things down into manageable steps, building a bit of slippage into each step, building a bit of slippage into the task, means that goals become achievable. You know, you want everything to be important, because, well, in social work pretty much everything is. Everything to be important but not urgent. That's what we're after. You know, so there's always time. You always feel as though you've just got that little bit of slippage built in, and that helps you relax, because you think, well, if I don't get this finished today, then it's okay. If you have to get it finished, then that creates stress. Stress creates foggy brain. Foggy brain means you kind of do the thing effectively that you're trying to do in the less time than you thought it might take. So define clear and achievable goals. That's going to help you. Optimizing your environment for flow. Optimizing your environment with minimal distractions. And yes, we can't head off all of the distractions in any job probably these days. We can head off as many of them as possible. Sticking your mobile phone out the way so you can't get to it, you know, doing that kind of thing. You know, we can do some things that will help us, that if we get one of those remarkable days where we're not interrupted by our manager or by, you know, the phone ringing or the Teams call or whatever, then we can at least get some flow going. So, you know, switch off your email, switch off Teams. If you've negotiated that as a possibility, it absolutely should be for this kind of thing. So where we're at, define clear and achievable goals, optimize your environment, establish routines. You know, that's that thing about a rhythm. Have a rhythm across the day. How do you start your day? You know, what do you do over lunch? How do you end your day? all that kind of thing. Have routines to signal to your brain and your body, actually, that we're shifting gear here. We're shifting gear, we're shifting focus. We're no longer in life mode. We need to get into work mode. We need to engage those different parts of our brain so that we're ready to go with those things that are required. Trying to balance the challenge and the skill. Maybe this is something that managers need to work on with their staff. We need to be stretched a little bit. We need to be stretched in terms of what we can do. I think it's important that we get that high challenge, high care thing going on. So that we're looking after people, but we're challenging them as well. Just stretch them, just a little stretch goal about complexity, maybe, or something of that nature. If you can't get big, long periods of time, then embrace short bursts of focus. I talk about that in the book as well, so I'll leave that for the techniques side of it rather than the key ideas. And cultivate this idea of mindfulness. I've mentioned this a few times now, that mindfulness is the manifestation of meditation in day-to-day life. So if you teach yourself to be mindful through meditation practice or journaling or mindful walking or whatever, so you switch your busy mind off, then you'll be able to switch your busy mind off when you get down to individual tasks if you teach yourself to do that. So really important. And you're not always going to, that final thing about kind of getting feedback, you are not always going to get some feedback from somebody. So you need some sort of self-affirmation, I suppose. And I get that through the simple thing of changing the task to a different colour on my calendar. And I go, yeah, I've done that right, next thing, let's go. So this flow, it doesn't have to be an elusive and mystical state. Although, if Gloria Mark's right, it's difficult to achieve. So if we can't achieve flow, let's try and achieve rhythm through our day. And we'll only do that if we embrace it through our planning and through daily practice. Doing it day in, day out. It's what you do day in, day out that makes the difference, not what you do when suddenly you think, wow, I need some self-care. I need to do something here to control all of this. State of flow. Enjoy. See you next time.